All right. All right. So I wanted to explain the jetting on these real quick. And I may screw this up, but so velocity stack goes on this end. All right. So velocity stack, air in, butterflies are on this side. This is the top of a side draft carburetor. These two holes here is where the idle jets are. This, the idle jet, okay, that would be compressed all the way in. So that's what your idle jet looks like. You got that hole on the bottom is your jet orifice, and okay, you can see it says 70 F8 right there. So that's 0.070 millimeters. F8 is the designation they give to the size of this hole. And the size of this hole, let me pull this jet apart. Okay. Size of that hole and the size of that hole. So what happens is fuel comes in here. If you look down here, when you screw this in, do this without screwing it up. Okay. The jet seat's down in there, and there's fuel around it. So what happens is the fuel comes, the jet seals that, comes up through, and it's all being drawn in through the signal in the carburetor. So the air going in imparts a signal, vacuum if you want to call it that, in this area. So the jet allows X amount of fuel inside this tube. The air, which is this area up in here, comes in here. So this top of this, this is your fuel well, and your floats under here, your accelerator pump, and your needle and seat. So air comes up. There's air available in here. So the jet, the nozzle lets how much fuel metered inside this tube. When these are connected together, the air is drawn in through that air bleed right there. So fuel comes in the bottom, air goes in the side, mixes inside this, and then those 4 holes is where the fuel comes out. And you can see that down in there. So you can see how this is threaded on each side, and kind of makes a seal. So that is where the idle jet is, all the mixture for the fuel and the air emulsions there. These are your mains. And with this type of carburetor, I can remove both of these mains, leave the idle jets in, and drive the car on the idle jets to tune the idle jets without it affecting the mains. So the mains would have no effect as long as I didn't go wide open throttle. Okay, so this one's been modified. So this one, you got the holder, which you can see down there is an air bleed, little tiny hole. So if I can't one hand this. Let me see if I can grab these. So this one's a different one, but this is a stripped down one. So see how it says F4? So that's the design. So this part of the tube here can be thinner. If you look at this one, you see how this part in this diameter in relation to this diameter is roughly, it's a step bigger, but this one here is a lot bigger. So what it's doing is this part displaces fuel down in that fuel well. So if you look down there, it's something similar. And if I can go, and there's where the fuel exits right there on the side. So when you're adjusting your floats, you're adjusting the float level up inside that well and high enough that it doesn't go out that hole while you're idling. And so what's going on is until that signal is great enough through the venturi, it won't pull fuel through there. So this is, okay, if I place these side by side, boom. So you can see the difference. So these are emulsion tubes. So if you take apart a Holley and you take apart the float bowl, and then the metering plate or their fuel block that's right behind the float bowl, that is where your emulsion tubes are. So on a Holley, you'll usually see 3 holes spaced out, or if it's a aftermarket one, there might be 5, and then those might have a brass plug in there so you can change them, and that's what these holes are. And these control, just like a Holley, when your fuel level is up in that well and there's nothing drawn on it, the fuel level is going to be higher. It's going to be up in here. So say this is in there and the fuel level's somewhere around this area. I don't know exactly where it's going to be, but I'm guessing it's somewhere in this area. So the air comes in the top, down through that air bleed, and mixes with the fuel that is stagnant inside here, which is up to about this level. You notice this one over here, I blocked all the holes up here, so there's no air available inside the chamber at low speed. And then as you accelerate, the fuel level drops, opening up more air holes. So as the fuel comes in the main jet down here, that's the main jet, the fuel comes up through and out here into that tube. So the thickness here controls how much fuel is in that tube, which changes your mixture. And then as the fuel level drops and opens up these air holes, the air bleed allows more air in there to mix with that fuel before it gets sucked out into the carburetor. So you're setting up your fuel that's coming out of the jet to be mixed with the air coming through here. And that's how everything is metered and tuned and all that. So if you look inside here, you can see, it goes up and then the fuel goes in there and then just goes out those holes right there and fills up the tube. So all your fuel is just in that tube and it's drawn out of there. And then the available air that's in there is what you're using. Okay, and these are what your jets look like, your fuel jets. That's a really big one there. You see the hole in the end's pretty huge, and then the one I'm running is fairly small comparatively. That one there's, I think that's a 185, I think. These are an F7 tube, and that's a 185. You can't see that. Hell, I can barely see it. But that's a 185 jet, and these are like a 210 or bigger. And this says, I think I have 194 written on there, but I may have drilled these out previously when I was experimenting. But anyways, so idle jets. I pull up in my driveway. I take the little cap off with the Mickey Mouse ears, and I just pull these jets out and I change those, go for another drive, come back, look at my AFR gauge while I'm driving, see what's going on. And another way you can tell where you're at, if you look at this. So I think David Vizard pointed this out. So this is how it's in the well, right? Down in there like that. So if you flip it over, you can tell This is how you tell where you are. So you just work your way up from idles down here. And as the fuel level goes up, this is as you accelerate. This is where your RPM climbs. So, this is how you tell what air holes you're hitting. And if I had a throttle position sensor and I knew where, which I could buy one for this, but I'm not going to bother, you can judge where these holes are coming in and how much fuel you have available. So what my plan is I've been literally, all I have to do is I drive around calmly, I'm just barely cracking the throttles, and I'm on my jets, on my idle jets. So I could drive around with just my idle jets, and I could do a tune with those. And that's why I drive around, I figure out, what my idle AFR is, and then what my cruising AFR is at what RPM, and what, position my foot pedals in. And again, I'm barely, a 16th to an 8th pedal. I'm not really cracking my pedal open, my butterflies open at all. And then from there, changing this, I'll know, I didn't change these. I'm just changing my my chokes. So changing my chokes, I'll know. I still have to do these. I got 44s in there. So they and I put the 43s in. 44. 44. 44. So just changing this out will increase the signal on the jets I have. So increasing the signal means more fuel is being drawn through. So what the goal is, my idle, I am 3/4 of a turn out on my idle mixture screws. And all the books say you want to be 1.5 to 2 turns. That's where you want to be. And I can't get there because I'm not drawing enough fuel through. Like I said, it's just drizzling out there. It's not being drawn out. So, and the idea is if I can draw more fuel through, I can go to a smaller jet size. And that will increase everything beyond there. So it'll be a higher signal, and I'll be able to open up my idle more and use a smaller jet. So if I open up my idle more to get the same AFR, I'm hunting for a 12 at idle, 12 to 13. So if I'm hunting at 13 at idle, and I can get a stronger signal on that, then when I accelerate, that means it'll pull even more fuel through, so I shouldn't be getting lean. Because on these, your idle, it's like everything else. Your idle setting is added to your transition setting, and then when the mains kick in, it's added to that. Everything is always pulling fuel. And there should be less of a signal on the idle. There'll still be fuel going through it, but there'll be less of a signal because of the position on the wall versus out in the center where the main venturis are. But again, theoretically, this should increase the signal. So again, see you on the forum.